Crank 'em up.
Listen up, sports fans. Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for our 28th year of NFL action. With the industry's biggest sign-up bonus of up to 200%, BetUS offers our members the opportunity to cash in on all your favorite sports, including NFL, NBA, MLB, and more. We've also got hundreds of new casino games, including the coolest new European slots, and our live dealers are waiting for you at the table. Sign up at BetUS.com today to get into the action. BetUS, where the game begins.
And now, broadcasting live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts now.
Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. We are back at it here on a Thursday. And by the way, it is a holiday. Happy Juneteenth to everybody, wherever and however you may be watching or listening. Thanks for making us part of your day here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. We got a lot to discuss. Well, Chase, back-to-back NHL Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. They got the job done, and tonight I have a little feeling about OKC and Indiana here tonight, but from what we're told, Tyrese Haliburton is playing tonight. So that could be a difference maker for Indiana, and being on home court, you better hope that Caitlin Clark, Reggie Miller, they got enough juice in the tank to be pumping up these Pacers here tonight. But, man, I was like, well, here we go, Canada. Another year again that we have to wait for them to eventually win a Stanley Cup again. I mean, that was
Canadian sports all in general, man. They just like it's not their time. Like the only Canadian champion we've had in the like 2000s, like 2010s or later, is the Toronto Raptors.
Yes.
And it's sad because the Blue Jays haven't won since '93. The freaking Maple Leafs, I don't even know when the last time was that they won and everything.
Long time.
You know, you don't have a Canadian football team like in the NFL and everything like you do for
you know.
You got a league, yeah, but like, you know, when have they been relevant and everything? Like not anything that like, wow, did you see that Canadian quarterback throw for 5,000 yards this season? Like, nobody's talking about that. It's hilarious. But I've got Thunder in 7.
Oh, man. Yeah, I'm thinking about that, too. I think this game might go to 7. But before we touch up and onto the subject here, because we got great guests amongst us. Look, so first off, congratulations to the Florida Panthers, back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. And this is now the 6th straight year that the NHL has had a Florida-represented team in the Stanley Cup final between Tampa Bay and with the Florida Panthers. But I will say this, because people had asked the question to Gary Bettman when it came to, teams in Florida making it thus far to the Stanley Cup final. And people are like, how in the world is this even happening? Like Florida's it's popping with hockey right now. Well, the thing of it was, and I think he said it best, is that, look, nobody was even paying attention to the state of Florida for a long time when it came to hockey. And when they first got the Thunder, then eventually they ended up getting the Panthers. Like, there wasn't so much of this that was going on. They were just a team in the league. And then eventually, fast forward, you got Martin St. Louis, you had LeCavier, and then, the Tampa Bay Lightning, when they first won the Stanley Cup, it was like they were on cloud 9. They're like, okay, we've stamped our mark here. So then, fast forward, you go and get Steven Stamkos, you get Braden Point, you get Nikita Kucherov, and that Lightning team was just so elite. And eventually they were going to end up making the Cup, and it took them years. They made it on, didn't win it, and after, a key injury and key inconsistencies, they got back up. They kept fighting. They kept winning games. And then eventually it was going to take until we got into the bubble that year where Tampa Bay, they eventually won it again and then won for a second straight year against, and I hate bringing this up because we do have our guests covering Montreal, but when they beat the Canadiens that year. But eventually, listen, dynasties don't ever last, okay? Everybody knows this. When dynasties start off, it usually happens in short year spurts. I mean, I've had the pleasure of seeing several dynasties in my lifetime where I would watch the Giants dynasty where they won 3 World Series in 5 years. Okay, once you have Buster Posey as your catcher and you're relying on great pitching and at least very good hitting that's giving you runs, they're giving you hits, and they're controlling leads. I had the pleasure of watching Golden State's dynasty, even at the time when I would watch the Lakers three-peat and then watch them win it back-to-back with Pau Gasol. So I've had the pleasures of watching all of those. But watching the Lightning and watching the Florida Panthers, what's different about both those teams is that it all comes down to coaching. It's one of those things. But I think what's similar about them, they got great offense. I think they've got a very good goaltender that they rely on to give them stop shots and really make, clutch plays. Then there's the defensive side of things. You got to get your body up in front. You got to be able to be the tone setter and then get the puck back to offense. And the way that I watched that last night, how in the world, if you're Edmonton, you'll let Sam Reinhart walk all over you for 4 goals and then you couldn't even come up with anything. This was the same energy I felt about the Toronto Maple Leafs. You're on home ice. You got Florida right there with you and you fold. What the hell's the matter with you? That's the one thing that I could not stand. And I harped about that team like, hey, Craig Berube, he's won a Stanley Cup. They actually look like a better team. Nope, I was fooled. They fooled me the same way that the Dallas Cowboys would fool me in any other year when they start to get better and then they just kind of gave it up all from there. But look, Florida, good for the state of Florida, okay? The only teams now that have not won a championship at all in their team's history has been the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Tampa Bay Rays. Even though the Rays have made it to 2 World Series in their organization's history, they still have yet to win one. And the Jags, come on. When are they going to stop being the top 10 draftee merchants every single year? Are they eventually going to turn, the tide? We know 2017 they got close, but, it's all a matter of question marks at the end of the day. So, yeah, I just think Florida, they were an overpowering team. It's got to feel good for Paul Maurice because this is exactly the group that he wanted when he first took on the job after coming off of Winnipeg. So, good for them. They win another Stanley Cup, but as far as Edmonton, we don't know what their future beholds. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But it's a great show so far because we got everything hockey lined up here for us. So starting it off here and leading us off, we're talking about the Chicago Blackhawks. Connor Bedard, I'm excited for this future. So to join me here talking on the Blackhawks, here's Jack Bushman. Funny story. I actually had the pleasure of watching Connor Bedard in person here in Colorado at Ball Arena. And I got to say, I mean, the kid's very talented. There's a bright future ahead of them. But knowing Chicago, they have been a very proud, old school organization where you've seen a dynasty where they've won 3 Stanley Cups in the span of the years they did with Kane and Taves. So to see this after what we watched with Florida, is it safe to say Florida's just thriving in hockey right now?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, 6 consecutive Stanley Cup appearances, not just the Panthers organization, but hockey in that entire state is absolutely booming. And I think you brought up a great point, Jake, by the way. First, want to say thank you for having me on the show. Greatly appreciate it. But I thought you brought up a great point talking about how everyone's talking about Florida hockey now. And just 7-8 years ago, it wasn't like this whatsoever. And I think it's funny, all the narratives and all the people talking about, oh, they don't have a state income tax. That's been a thing for a long, long time, okay? Like, people could have came down to Florida and not have paid taxes on their income for a while. Now that the Florida teams have made 6 straight Stanley Cup appearances, everyone seems to be griping about it. But I think this is absolutely great for the sport to be having championship teams all over the country, right? And down in the South in particular, I think that's excellent for the sport. And what a time to be a Florida Panthers fan. You mentioned the dynasty label there. I know 3 championships is kind of what we think of when we talk about dynasties, but shoot, the way that they got it done in back-to-back years, and 2, I will say, like, dominating the Edmonton Oilers in do or die games, dominating the Toronto Maple Leafs in that game 7 there. Like, this team was just clearly so much superior than everyone. Hats off to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you got powering forces like Matthew Tkachuk, and listen, I will go on the record. I didn't think that relationship with Brad Marchand, when they first got him, I thought it was going to be a little weird, but yet it still worked. I was like, I don't know what happened in the middle of it, but somehow something clicked, and it clicked in the right way. So talking about, Chicago, because, you've covered this team, and even for some of the other Chicago teams, from the Bulls, the Cubs, so many of them, Chicago's a great place. It's on my bucket list of places to visit, and the thing about it is, what I know that Chicago harps on is they harp so heavily on tradition. So, I mean, now we're starting to see the Bears turn a new leaf. I think hopefully the Bulls, because, I mean, it's been years since MJ retired. And, and then you look at the Cubs, they broke the curse. So when you look at the Blackhawks post the dynasty that they had, I said this as I was like, they kind of held on to some of their core pieces for quite a long time. I'm watching this right now with the Pittsburgh Penguins. They need to get rid of this core 3. But to me, they got a new they got a new revival the minute that they drafted Connor Bedard, and I think he is fantastic. I mean, watching Connor McDavid and seeing this kid now, something is going to be brewing up and into Chicago. But after what we've seen this past season, we know that draft picks have been a big thing, and we also know development and trying to get the best players around for the growth of Connor Bedard. That's been kind of the plan since day one, right?
Yeah, and this feels like an opportunity this summer to really go and achieve that, right? The last couple of seasons with the Blackhawks, they were paying the price of keeping those core members on a little bit too long there and sort of kicking the can down the road, still trying to be competitive. It really cost this team in the developmental factor and not really caring too much about what was going down in their minor league affiliate. It cost them in the long run, and that's why it's been such a slow-moving rebuild these last few years, and certainly has tested a lot of Blackhawks fans' patience, especially when you just outlined the rest of the teams in the city haven't been all that great in some time as well. But it does feel like this offseason, now that they have some of their other young players step onto the scene and they can kind of look around and go, okay, this is what we have. This is what we still need to bring in. It feels like really this is the first summer where they can go and bring in some talent along with Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar and make sure those guys' development goes as smoothly as possible. And when watching the Blackhawks on the ice last year, Connor Bedard was still their leading point scorer. He was probably their team MVP, at the very lowest co-MVP with Ryan Donato, but there's still another level for him to get to. And I don't know, with what the Blackhawks have on their roster, I don't know if that's going to be enough to truly get Bedard where we want him to go this season and take that next step. So I'm really hoping through the NHL draft, through free agency, maybe even in the trade market in the next couple of weeks, they'll be able to bring in some more skilled players in that top 6 to help out this offense more.
Absolutely, man, because I just would love to see this kid have a very good, group around him to where they could be more offensively centric around that. But even at the same time, I mean, I've been watching the goaltenders, but you mentioned about it because now officially, the offseason starts. We've already gotten 2 trades so far. Eric Halla's going to Nashville, and now we got Mason Marchment going to Seattle. So we know the offseason's officially kicked off. So if Chicago had to think of some key addition names, are there anybody that in particular that they are targeting that the Chicago Blackhawks can hopefully land a deal on here this offseason?
Yeah, I expect them to be involved in both the free agent and the trade market these next couple of weeks. In the trade market, there have been rumblings in the last couple of days that they'd be interested in Buffalo Sabres forward J.J. Peterka, who potted 60 points last year on a struggling Buffalo Sabres team. The Blackhawks are one of a few teams who have already called up Sabres general manager Kevin Adams and showed some interest. And we've heard rumblings in the past couple of weeks that the Hawks, they want to bring in another young difference maker to that top six. And Peterka, only 23 years old, so would be a guy who could come in and grow with a lot of these young guys and establish good chemistry with one another. So that's definitely a name to keep an eye out for over the next couple of weeks. I know Peterka isn't really like a household name, but a young blossoming player for the Buffalo Sabres. And then the free agent market, Jake, should be real interesting. Mitch Marner is the crown jewel out there. It doesn't sound like the Blackhawks, even though they have a slew of cap space, doesn't sound like they're expected to be in the mix for him. But I would love to see them go and get maybe someone like Nikolai Ehlers from the Winnipeg Jets or Brock Besser from the Vancouver Canucks, two guys who, again, are proven offensive players in this league, known point producers that can go and give Connor Bedard that support. I think it's going to take more than just running back Tyler Bertuzzi and Ryan Donato again next year to, again, get Connor Bedard to elevate to that level that we all want to see him at and go out there and thrive, not just kind of survive out there on the ice. So Ehlers, Besser in the free agent market, those are two names I'd like to see the Blackhawks be aggressive for, and JJ Peterka in the trade market as well, Jake.
So the New York Islanders are kicking off the NHL draft, and I was very surprised of it, you know, and here's the thing. I talked to many NBA fans when it came to the lottery draft. They're like, how in the world could the Dallas Mavericks get the number 1 overall pick after they just traded Luka? And I was like, listen, I live in Denver. To me, this is not coincidental. When you know the sports industry, this stuff happens for a reason. And so to me, I feel like the draft lotteries at times are like a scratch ticket. Okay, it don't matter the percentage as long as you can honestly get into the close-ups, because if you got somebody up over there that's like 14, 16, 18%, you would think they would have the higher odds to get the number 1 overall pick. But sometimes they end up landing into like the middle of the pack to the top 10. And it's like, man, when are we ever going to get, you know, the best thing coming up out of college? So looking at the NHL draft and what Chicago was having in plan, you know, for this rebuild, for trying to get at least a better group here in the next couple of years, has there been anybody they've been scouting on in part of this, you know, to build up? And do the Blackhawks right now, amongst their minor league build, that could be a name to watch out for coming into the next up-and-coming season?
Yeah, so the NHL draft is going to be fascinating because in this year's draft class, there's a pretty clear-cut top 2, Matthew Schaefer, Michael Misa. My jaw would be on the floor if one of those guys fall beyond number 2. It's kind of a similar situation to when the Blackhawks were on the clock in 2019. The top 2 guys, they're expected to go 1 and 2, and then it's kind of up in the air. The player I've been the highest on for the last couple of months since we found out the Blackhawks were going to be at number 3 is James Higgins. Didn't have maybe the freshman season at Boston College that some thought he was going to have, but was still a point-per-game player as an 18-year-old freshman going up against older and more experienced competition. And less than 7-8 months ago, he was right there in the conversation for being the number 1 overall pick. I know he would be another undersized player in the Blackhawks top 6, and they already got a lot of those, and Connor Bedard, Frank Nazar, Oliver Moore's coming on the scene. Even Ryan Donato, who they just re-signed, doesn't have a ton of size to his game as well. So I see the complications of adding another undersized skill player up there, but to me, I just think Higgins is that much better and has that much higher of a ceiling than the rest of the prospects in the group. But from what I've been hearing around the Blackhawks, doesn't sound like they're really all that interested in him, which is curious to me. But if they're not going to be going with him, it's probably down to 3 guys, Jake: Caleb Denoyer, Anton Frondel, and Porter Martone. Frondel is currently listed as the favorite on some sports books. I would like to see them go with Porter Martone. If it's not going to be James Higgins, it's a guy who has some size and some skill to go and play along with Connor Bedard. Good goal scoring makeup along with playmaking, and is already well over 200 pounds at 6'3" as an 18-year-old. So those are kind of the 2 guys in the draft that I've kind of had circled for the Blackhawks at number 3. And did you ask as well about some prospects in the minor league system to keep an eye on? Just want to make sure I had that question right. There's a slew of them, Jake, and that's what's fun about this Blackhawks team. Probably not going to win very many games. I'm not going to lie to you, but there's going to be a lot of intriguing young pieces on the scene. I would say Sam Rinzel is probably the one to watch the most. He joined on with the Blackhawks late in the season after finishing his sophomore year with Minnesota. And I mean, he looked like a top 4 defenseman right out of college, and 6'3", 6'4", some really good size, and skates like a deer out there. He plays a game that should translate well to the modern day NHL game with the way that he's able to skate and play a skill game while also having some size. So yeah, Sam Rinzel, keep an eye out for him on the Blackhawks back end next season.
Sounds good to me. So a final question here before we move on. You've had the pleasure of watching this very coach, Joel Quenneville. So now he's going into Anaheim. We know he's left such a big mark, in Chicago, and obviously, not getting into the personal stuff, but the fact of it is that, the Blackhawks, they felt that revival because they are such an old school, traditional team that everybody knows that when you play Chicago, you're going to get mixture offense. You're going to get some physical defense in the middle of it, especially with these checks. How do you evaluate, watching Joel Quenneville for as long as you have, what this may look like in Anaheim, just kind of giving a preview of it, because I just say this. We've tried this with the last couple of coaches who have kind of been in like that Mike Babcock old school mentality, and not a lot. And just recently, we had John Tortorella get let go, and that didn't even work out from there. Is there something we should honestly think of with Joel Quenneville, or do you think there's a bright future here in Anaheim?
I'm a little torn on this one because I do think Joel, in terms of the old school coaches, you mentioned Mike Babcock, John Tortorella, there's a handful of them that have kind of been, recycled around the NHL the last 10 years when honestly, it feels like the game is probably past that era of coach just because the game is so different now, Jake. Like skill and speed dominate this league. And you even go back 10 years ago, like it was all about size and physicality. The game is just so much different. What I will say is if anyone as an old school NHL head coach can go and figure it out and go be the head honcho behind the bench that the Anaheim Ducks need, it's Joel Quenneville. There's a reason he's the second winningest coach in NHL history. There's a reason why, despite everything that happened with him and the end of his tenure in Chicago and why he had to resign with the Florida Panthers, why he is getting another opportunity back in the NHL, and that's because of his pedigree as a proven winner. I do feel like my personal beliefs, it probably would have been a good time for Joel Quenneville to just been ushered out of the league, but I'm not foolish. I know how the NHL works. I know how these things operate. So I did expect Joel Quenneville to get another opportunity, and I do feel like the Anaheim Ducks are a real good spot, both for him in terms of that organization and the fit and just where this team is going. And it almost feels similar to when Joel was brought on to the 2008-09 Blackhawks. Like they had a lot of good young pieces. It felt like the future was super promising. They just needed that proven NHL head coach who's been there and done it before to be the right leader to command them. And seems like that's what Anaheim now has, and Joel Quenneville get another opportunity.
Yeah, it should be really interesting because I love Trevor Zegras and I love some of these youngsters that they're trying to build up in Anaheim. And they just got to find the consistency, find ways to win the games that initially were L's, but then you turn them around and be W's. Hopefully he can really change this culture here with the Ducks because it's been a long time running for them. And so hopefully it's a good thing for him. But Jack, appreciate you for coming on by, man, and sharing me your insights, locking on in with all of our audiences here where people can find you to keep up with the Chicago Blackhawks all season long.
Yeah, absolutely, Jake. Thank you very much for having me on the show. If you want to tune into all the Blackhawks offseason coverage, you can find my show Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. We're also on YouTube, and you can check me out on any social media platform at Jack Bushman 2.
There you go, guys. All right, Jack, appreciate you for coming on by. Enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of the week, and we'll see you soon.
Absolutely. Should be an interesting Game 6 here tonight. I'm about to go tune in.
I think Indiana might have it, man. I just have a gut feeling Tyrese Halliburton's going to come out the gate, and he's going to do the work here tonight.
I'd love to see a Game 7. It's good for the game. Keep this summer extended because we're running out of sports.
Yes, indeed. All righty, man. Take care.
Thank you, Jake. Appreciate you, buddy.
No problem. All right, shifting on. We're still talking some hockey, and this is going to be quite an interesting bill, but it's going to be a bright future. And the fact that we have a former NHL great with Martin St. Louis leading up this team here for Montreal. should be interesting. But after what we've seen with Edmonton here in this in the Stanley Cup final, disappointing. Canada now having to wait another year for this. But joining us to talk a lot about that, here are representatives Ian Boisvert and Laura Saba coming here onto the show. So after watching that game last night, I mean, I was just sorely disappointed. I thought I would have gotten at least some sort of fight and fire out of Edmonton, but I know it's got to be feeling for everybody else all across the nation of Canada, from Winnipeg, Calgary, Montreal. I mean, they just want this curse broken so badly right now, with the fact that U.S. hockey right now, with all these teams, they're winning all these Stanley Cups, and it's like, when are we going to have ours? How did you guys feel of that? I mean, aside from just, the Oilers losing that, but now Canada's got to wait another year for this now. How did you guys react to this?
Personally, I think for Montreal Canadiens fans, it's really just about Montreal being the one to get back there, right? And I think a lot of people here were cheering for the Oilers. Like, if you went out to bars and you were at restaurants, like, you would hear the cheers for the Oilers goals and things like that. And I know there's a lot of transplants here, but not everybody in the city is a Montreal Canadiens fan. And I do think a lot of people were just cheering for the Oilers because they wanted to see McDavid win one, right? They wanted to see one of the greats have a cup, because he is truly the best player in the world right now, right? But in terms of the drought, like, I think Montreal Canadiens fans would just prefer that it be Canada again. It'd be Montreal again. But it was a very telling game, in that I think the Oilers just stopped believing that they could win. And I think they stopped believing that they could win earlier than the last game, right? Yeah. I would say maybe in game 3, that might have been where they stopped believing it. And I understand why. It's because Florida is just stacked. They have the depth, and they seem relentless, and they seem unbeatable. And I think there's a reason for that. It's the depth up and down the lineup was just, it was hard for any team to overcome, even one such as Edmonton. There were like a few more issues with Edmonton than just not being able to get over that hump. But I really do think that the win was deserved. Like, Florida's win was deserved. They did everything they needed to do, and even more than was necessary to win.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, Ian, I got to ask, because now you guys have a coach, a former Florida player for himself, who won the Stanley Cup years ago with Lecavalier. Martin St. Louis, I'm interested in how this is going to build up for Montreal, because you're seeing him coach. You're seeing, Patrick Waugh and the Islanders. They get the number 1 overall pick, and I'm not sure exactly how that's going to end up, building up, but should be a bright future for them. But knowing St. Louis, an offensive player, and what they have with both Cole Caulfield and even with Nick Suzuki, this is a duo they truthfully don't want to break up. They want to keep this relationship, but build the best players up and around them to get Montreal past the hump and hopefully back up and into the cup at some point, right?
Yeah, and I think Marty, as a head coach, is a really big part of what the Canadiens are building. Throughout the year, you would hear the players talk about how they're playing for Marty. They want to win for their coach, which, that's kind of difficult to manufacture if it's not something that comes about itself naturally. There's not a guy in an NHL locker room who Marty St. Louis can't relate to. He was undrafted. He was passed up in expansion drafts when teams could have had him for free. I think the Blue Jackets were one of those expansion years. They could have had Marty for free. But he turns himself into a Hall of Famer. He wins cups. He wins personal trophies. He can relate to anybody in that locker room. And I think that's sort of where a lot of the belief comes from, in that if you guys just listen to me, we'll be fine. I'm going to help you guys become truly great. And I think, you mentioned Cole Caulfield. When Marty St. Louis was brought in, Cole Caulfield was struggling early on in his young career. And Marty was Cole's favorite player growing up. He used to wear 26 because he wanted to be like Marty. And he knew, that guy's small. I'm small. I can make it. And the second Marty comes in, Cole Caulfield becomes the goal scorer we kind of all hoped he would be. So Marty's influence is not just on that one player, but that is emblematic of how valuable he is to Montreal, and how the kind of impact he can have on any one player in that locker room at any given time.
100%. Laura, this was interesting, and I was curious about this because one player in particular that was trying to find his niche, and that was Patrick Laine. Because I watched him, in his time in Winnipeg and even up in Columbus, it seemed like there were times where he would get streaky. And to be honest with you, if I'm looking for just an all-around great player up and in hockey, to me, Patrick Laine is not my personal cup of tea because I do believe there is still some of the potential that he could show. But, coming into Montreal, what was something that changed about his game that got better and what he'll continue to work on? Because it seemed like streaky years in Winnipeg and up in Columbus, he's been trying to find that comfortability and niche. So what have you seen from Patrick Laine? Oh, got the mic muted.
I'm so sorry about that. I was just gonna say it's interesting that you asked me about it because Patrick Laine is actually Ian's boy. Ian really wanted Patrick Laine in Montreal from many, many years ago. He kept talking about it, and then eventually it happened. I think it was tough for Patrick Laine because when he came back in the preseason, he had that injury, and it took him a while to get back. I think one of the things that he had to kind of change is that he was not able to rely on his own skating all that much. So you would see there were some games where it looked like he was just picking a spot to be in so that everybody else could catch up and then he could score the goal. But I think it was really due to that injury. And then he just had such bad luck in the playoffs. He had a broken hand or a broken finger. And so I feel like the one big thing that I saw in Patrick Laine was he seemed comfortable around this team. I think, it goes back to what Ian was saying with Marty. Like Marty can relate to a lot of players and can be heard. And the team embraced Patrick Laine. He was given to them as a prize by Kent Hughes, right? Like Kent Hughes was like, I wanted to reward the effort that they made and bring in somebody who could put them over the edge. And a lot of people were laughed at when they said Patrick Laine turns this team into a playoff team, and the Canadiens made the playoffs, right? And largely in part due to all the power play goals that Patrick Laine was able to score. So he was a big part, but I don't know if I can say that any part of his game improved because he had to do so much adjusting to just be able to play games this time around. And you could only really see that he was starting to feel a lot more comfortable later in the like he came back. So like later in his portion of the season. And I think he got a lot of confidence at Four Nations. I think that really, really helped him a lot. But I got what we expected out of Patrick Laine this year, I think.
Yeah, it should be interesting for next year. And hopefully, if they keep adding in some good key additions to this group, I think there's going to be a bright future amongst them. An interesting conversation, though, too, is because, Carey Price, I mean, he's a well-respected goaltender in this Montreal Canadiens franchise. But we know, too, that the contract has been something that they've been working on tremendously for the last few years. So going into this off season, we know Montreal, they want to piggyback what they got off of this past season, getting into the playoffs, seeing what they've got in their core, and then find ways to, make some key additions. Ian, is there anybody in particular they've been targeting this off season that they would like to get a deal done, or at least, pick up somewhere that they're comfortable with maybe giving up some picks or maybe even a player here or there?
Yeah, there hasn't been a ton of names linked to the Canadiens at this point. One of them is a defenseman out of Vegas in Nick Hague, who's, very much a stay-at-home defenseman who will help their penalty kill and sort of take on what David Savard did last year for Montreal, just sort of be that designated penalty killer, stay-at-home defenseman. It's a valuable role in the National Hockey League. Otherwise, guys wouldn't get paid to do it. So really that's the only player that's really truly been linked to Montreal. Montreal's main get this summer, and until they get this kind of player, they're going to be after him, is a second line center. It's the big piece of the Canadiens rebuild or build as it is. Kirby Dach was penned to be that guy. He came in the first draft that this administration had. He was picked up on the draft floor, a big trade that got him to Montreal. And the player is tantalizing. 6'4" right shot center who can play like a little bit of a jerk and who has a lot of the soft skills as well. A lot of great playmaking, really good hands. Problem with him is he can't stay healthy. He blew out his knee twice in consecutive seasons. This past season, he lost it about midway through the year. The season before that, he played a game and a half and then lost the rest of the year due to a blown out knee. So that has necessitated the Canadians, going after a second line center. The problem is the things that they have to offer, picks and prospects, are the same thing that everybody else has to offer. You had our colleague from Locked On Blackhawks on a moment ago. They're trying to move that third overall pick for help now. The Canadians are trying to do the same thing. Utah's trying to do the same thing. Boston might be trying to do the same thing. So it's really difficult to make that move now. And Montreal's not going to make a move just for the sake of doing it. They want the right guy in there so that they can feel confident he's going to be able to play our system and play the way we want to play. So that's the big need for Montreal. I'm sure over the next week and into free agency, we'll start to get some names linked. But that's sort of what we're looking at as far as the big acquisition the Canadians might make this summer.
A final question here for you guys. Both of you can answer this, one or the other. But the way that I'm looking at the state of the NHL is they are growing. And, I've watched, other I've watched other leagues as well. I mean, the NBA, it seemed like the season kind of got dull. There wasn't really like a whole lot that was happening until we got the Luka trade. And then all of a sudden we go all the way down to the postseason. And now the postseason is a lot more interesting. Major League Baseball, they made a bunch of tweaks with their rules. We got last year's World Series between two big franchises, Yankees and Dodgers. And so you start looking at a lot of these small market teams. How could they possibly, make it better? And then the television deals and revenue. Gary Bettman and what he's been looking at with, the future of the NHL is that they got a new TV deal with Canada. They ended up, the Four Nations tournament, by the way, was an absolute success. I was so happy that they even came out with this. I mean, watching that U.S. and Canada game, and then immediately there's fights and everything. I'm like, that is hockey right there. And so to see the success of that, and then potentially down the road, we could be seeing some expansions. What are we seeing right now and witnessing for the future of the NHL, and not only just in the States, but even for just all around the globe, and how this is going to change up even for the state of the league itself?
Yeah, I think the salary cap going up is going to change a lot. It had been a flat cap for a while because the players were paying off escrow to the owners. They had owed the owners money over the course of the pandemic, so they were paying them back. Now that escrow is paid, the cap is going to increase exponentially over the next few years, which means a lot of teams are going to have a lot of money to throw around. I was thinking about this too in terms of the Luka trade, and in terms of like the Rafael Devers trade that happened this week in Major League Baseball. Those are two leagues with massive salary caps.
Yep.
And they can pay all these guys, but sometimes maybe owners just don't want to, and they don't want to continue to pay them. That's not really the case in the National Hockey League because the salaries are so low that you can kind of just eat them and it's not a big deal. And a lot of these, superstars don't get moved. I think as we start to get $15, $16 million to $20 million players, every year, we'll start to get into those situations where teams go, you know what? Like, yes, we have this guy who can be a superstar on our team, but do we really want to be paying that much for this player? So I think that's going to be part of the growth in the National Hockey League over the next little while, because we don't have a lot of these trades. We don't have really a Luka moment. We don't have that Rafael Devers trade that happened this week. So I think that's part of the growth. The expansion is always big because it's just a lot of revenue for the league. I mean, we're getting $500 million price tags on these expansion franchises, and it looks like Atlanta's going to get one. And I would imagine the first opportunity they get to go back to Arizona, they're going to do it. So that's, to me, like, those are just, it's a boon for the league. You don't really have to worry about the talent getting stretched too thin at this point. And I think that the league is trending in the right direction. The problem with the National Hockey League and Gary Bettman in general is how can they not screw it up? And that's lockouts, work stoppages like that. They need to avoid at all costs right now.
Yeah, 100%. Because especially with all the new money coming in, the last thing that you want to do is have a potential lockout. And I know Major League Baseball, they're not perfect themselves. And eventually they're going to have to figure that out because a lot of people have been screaming salary cap. But I don't know. To me, it's like I am trying to hold the owners accountable for some of this stuff because there's parts of it that they want to pay and parts of it they don't want to pay. But eventually you're going to want to make it better for your future of the franchises because you've got the fan bases speaking out for you. So that would be interesting, though, if it came down to the expansion, right? Atlanta, maybe the possible return of the Thrashers could be an interesting thing. Or, Arizona. I even thought about that because I'm like, I felt for Arizona fans when they left to go to Utah And now they've got, this franchise, the Mammoth, that now I'm excited for. Great ownership, well respected. But to bring it back up in Arizona, I mean, my whole thing was just don't give it to somebody named Alex Morello. For God's sakes, please don't. Because then it's like there's no hope from there, from top to bottom. But appreciate you guys for coming on by here up and onto the show. And to lock it on in for all of our audiences here, where people guys can find you talking everything Montreal Canadiens, because you guys now are officially busy from this offseason and up and into the draft.
Yeah. You can find our podcast, honestly, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, like you're watching us right now. You'll find us all over social media at Locked On Canadiens, Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram, you name it, we're on there. You will find my co-host Ian Boisvert at Maybe It's Ian. You will find me at The Active Stick. Thank you so much for having us, Jake.
Absolutely. Pleasure is all mine, guys. Enjoy the off season and the rest of the week, guys. Should be an interesting one, but let's just see how competitive that it will get when moves, trade talks, all this stuff starts to come up around the corner. Appreciate you guys for coming on by. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Yep, you bet. Oh, all righty, Chase. What a fun times, at least, even throughout this entirety of the week. But yeah, it is interesting. Because to me,
hockey to me is going to be the second most popular sport in the next 10 years.
Yeah, I could see that happen. Watching the NBA, watching Major League Baseball. I mean, baseball's trending in the right direction, but I think a lot of this is that the NBA, because they're so pro player, I don't even know how that they're going to end up handling a lot of the contracts. Because the thing I don't like are those max contracts that they can't even get out of. If they could just retweak that to where you could easily opt out, like what NFL does. They could opt out of these contracts up at any time, and then the owners don't have to feel obligated to end up paying up a lot of those players. They could just be like, well, if he's opting out and he wants more money, then by all means, we can go and draft the next guy, because we could get draft picks for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the one issue that baseball has, and why the viewership is went down for a while, but now it's coming back, is they are catering to the children more than they have in the past. But not only that, it's the oldest sport that we have in our country. Yeah. It was invented in 1852, and that's been around for over 150 years almost. And people play that in their backyard. They play it, and they play it in the summertime and everything to get something to do for the summer, like Acme ball, summer baseball, traveling baseball for camps and everything. And for some people, it's their life. It's all year long. But others, they just want to play it during the summer and then be done with it. And that's why baseball hits a spike in revenue and viewership from late June all the way up until September, because people are watching it in the summertime. It's giving them something to do. It's something that they love. But hockey, it's more entertaining, and it's newer, and it's something that you can go indoors to see. You don't have to sit out in rain and snow and anything like that. And then football, it's got the it factor and the exciting thing. But I do think that hockey has the chance to surpass even football, because they keep expanding, keep adding new teams, new elements, new areas where people have not had sports teams. And I think that if the NFL wants to keep up, they're going to have at least one or two expansion teams coming in the next 10 years.
Should be interesting. But let's take a quick break, and then we'll be right back up here on the show.
Looking for a show with the best takes and opinions? Want a show with the best coverage around the world of sports? Jam-packed with an all-star interview lineup? Then the best place to find it all, sports and entertainment, is right here. Join Jake Silva on the Snake Sports Talk Show, presented by SeatGeek and BetUS. Weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific on Sports Wave Network.
Oh man, this is why it's always so good to at least take a break from here, because especially when you got to use a much needed emergency restroom, especially. But I'm good. Yeah, we had great guests up on here earlier. Canadians, Blackhawks hockey. Really, really happy and excited for what the season will be next year. But yeah, that was just what an ending it was. Florida back-to-back. Should be an interesting off-season nonetheless. But first off, before we end up getting into something I really want to talk about here up and into the tail end, let's get to Chase here with the news.
This is the Hot Press.
Lots of stuff brewing up here up and onto the news earlier, man. So I'm curious of what's been happening around in the league.
Yeah, I mean, first things first, Henry Ruggs could get out on early release from prison. You know, he had a 3 to 10 year sentence, 3 being the minimum, 10 year being the maximum. He's been working out a lot, been running a lot in prison, and has, gone to meetings, Alcoholics Anonymous, anger management, a whole bunch of things to help, his demeanor. He's already, come out and shown remorse and apologized to the family. And he is seeking an NFL comeback when he's able to be out on parole starting this year. He's seeking an NFL return. We're going to see if some team will actually give him the chance to play again, because it's not like, it's not like those guys like Isaiah Bond, who never got the chance to actually be drafted because of a sexual misconduct allegation. This is more because he ended up killing somebody due to a speeding incident.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. I've heard some reports that he's open to a potential, Raiders reunion if given that opportunity. But there are going to be at least a couple of other teams that could be looking at him as well. But yeah, I just thought it was just such a crazy scenario, and only it being, a couple years already. And so we'll see what happens. I mean, the only thing is I could say is the kid was talented out of Alabama, coming out the same draft time as Jerry Jeudy and a couple others. And so, but for him, it was he was more of that slot weapon that, he's got bursts of speed. You can throw him up and over the top, and then you can basically get him in a bunch of spots. So this is going to be quite a return to the NFL if this becomes the case. But let's just see. I know he's definitely learned a lot. Was quite emotional throughout the entirety of the whole thing, and sent the apology to the family as well, because I know that was something that was very much near and dear to him. So we'll see. We'll see what this walk of life is going to be like for Henry Ruggs.
Now, speaking on the terms of speeding tickets and everything,
yeah,
I don't know the whole narrative behind it. Maybe it's because it's the city of Cleveland and, nobody likes them, or, what it may be. I have no idea, but Colin Cowherd's already changed his tune about it and everything, saying that it's a bad look. But Shedeur Sanders has been ticketed twice in the city of Cleveland for speeding over 90 mile an hour for the one and 100 mile an hour for the other. And right now, Dion has come out and said that he's handling the situation, making sure that his son knows that, he needs to focus on being a good person on and off the field and doing things right, even including driving. But people are blowing this way out of proportion. We've seen guys the likes of Tyreek Hill, Rashee Rice, and a whole bunch of others speed and get in trouble for far worse things, including drugs, and nobody seems to bat an eye about it. But the moment Shedeur Sanders does it, everybody's up in arms about it.
Well, to me, when I saw this, I'm like, look, they're going to get this cleared and cleaned up. I didn't have an issue. The only thing is that, like they're doing right now, which is the right thing, which is obviously setting his act straight. And I mean, that's just apparent in them. You got to set them straight because you have a future in the NFL. You don't want to screw that up. So again, it's like, but how many times have we seen NFL players get ticketed? I mean, Tyreek Hill, multiple other players have been ticketed for high speeding on these highways. So, I mean, this kind of stuff does happen. Now, unlike, the Henry Ruggs situation where we know up in Vegas it was disastrous, but at the same time, we have seen that from a bunch of these young players. And so hopefully he learns it, grows from it, comes back up into camp, and he's about the same. He's ready to work, ready to compete, and then he's ready to become potentially the franchise quarterback of the Cleveland Browns.
Now, reports out of New York's camp is that Jackson Dart is trying his damnedest to be the starting franchise quarterback of the New York Giants this year rather than sitting and waiting one more year. But I know Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll have both sat down and talked to him saying that their plan is to start Russell Wilson and have Jameis Winston as the backup and have Jackson just sit there and learn the playbook and learn the whole NFL and how it is, the best ways to make your reads, best way to run the offense, everything like that, to make sure that he's comfortable for next year. And to me, I think that is the right thing to do and the best thing. Jackson Dart just needs to go in there and show everybody, like, look, I know what I'm doing right off the bat.
Yeah. No, it's yeah. I mean, this season, like we said, there's going to be many different storylines that could potentially end up changing up from here. But this is going to be an interesting scenario for one, because again, lots of teams that they're changing up a lot of their scheme aspects. But I just think with the quarterback situations this year, it's going to be a lot more unique than what it was last year. But you are going to start to see like the year twos, come out from some of these young quarterbacks. But as far as, for the rookies are concerned up from here, it just depends on. I have full confidence that I think Jackson Dart, he's going to end up cleaning up a lot of his stuff that he had in Ole Miss. And Brian Daboll is going to be sure of that. Because, again, he's playing he's basically coaching for his job. And at the same time, you're trying to find that future franchise quarterback. And, even when you have both Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, you do have at least the veteran guys there to prepare for that future. But as far as other rookie quarterbacks are concerned, I mean, I just don't think we're going to have that big of a jolt like what we did last year. But maybe next year's quarterback class could have a little bit of a similarity from then just the past class before this.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see what's going on. And a small little tad bit of teeny bit of news before I get into the major thing is that Daniel Jones has been looking very good at the Colts minicamp practices so far, and all signs are leaning towards that he might start at the start of the season. But the thing I want to get into, and the big piece of news, is the Lakers have sold their franchise to a new owner, and I am loving it.
Yeah. I was like, I couldn't even believe it, man. Like, once I heard that news story, I mean, I never thought I'd see the day that it would actually happen. I really didn't think I would see the day. And, I mean, because think about it. They had the team since the late 70s. And then now we're starting to see a new era up from this. I'll talk a little bit more about it, but to me, it's like they are trying to start up a new page. You now have a potential star, even with Luka, and really building this up for the Lakers. I mean, it's going to be interesting one way or the other. As far as LeBron James is concerned, I don't know. I mean, it's really just kind of playing this all by ear. But you got to think, look at the success that the Dodgers are having right now with their international funds. Because once Shohei Ohtani is out there, there's your star player that's going to give you all of the international tickets. And now you've got Luka Doncic, and now you got the same owner. But here's what's funny about this. We may end up seeing a comeback of Magic Johnson in this building. Because the one promotional name that you can't leave out of here, especially when it comes to the Lakers. Because remember that conversation where eventually Magic Johnson ended up stepping away and went to the Dodgers to really focus things up from there on their business ends? Because Jeannie Buss always looked at Magic as a mentor, because being a player, playing for this organization, understanding all of the ins and outs, and exactly with what her dad, Dr. Buss, ended up, because he's the one that made the draft pick. He's the one that invested in the kid when he had him and Kareem. So, the only thing I think which was the problem was you had the stuff that was going on with Rob Pelinka and a couple of other people in the office. So now to have a new ownership, and Jeannie's still going to be the governor while doing this transaction, it should be exciting. Should be exciting. Again, I'm going to miss the days of both the Forum and Staples Center, but now we've got Crypto Arena as the new thing, and now you got a new ownership. So I think it should be really interesting to see, but I'm hoping that we actually do make the Lakers a well-respected franchise at the end of the day, like we have from like the days of the 80s, the days of Kobe and Shaq. That would just really, really blow up the whole NBA community.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see like how that turns out and how that goes. And I'm looking forward to it. And I'm going to do some more research on this to actually see if this was real. But I came across a small article online today that says that there has been a billionaire that has put in a proposal to buy the Pittsburgh Pirates and everything. He has put in a $6 billion bid to buy the Pittsburgh Pirates. He said that he would rather overpay for a franchise that he can make, or like he thinks he can make successful just by shelling out the money, than what it would be to sit back and watch another mediocrity season and another season to where they're probably going to let their star player walk. And he said he's getting tired of it. So I'm going to do some more research on that and get back. But from what I saw, there was a $6 billion bid put in to buy the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Wow. Well, if that becomes the case, I hope that they actually make that transaction quicker than normal, because especially when you're right now in the primes of Paul Skeens being your star, and then you've got O'Neal Cruz and a couple others on this roster. So if they can honestly make that sale and give it to the new owner, that's obviously going to put out money for it, because that's what all these Pirates fans have been harping about for a long time, and even for a lot of these other small market teams. If you could get somebody that could buy it, because here's the thing. We watched the Baltimore Orioles. They got a new ownership, so there was new money up and into there, and they've got a young roster. So why can't the Pirates? The Pirates, we know, they haven't been able to win a bunch of games, probably post since. Andrew McCutchen is still there. It's more of a farewell tour than anything else, but we remembered at the time when they had Starling Marte and they had Russell Martin. They had a really good rotation amongst them. So if they
also remember Josh Beckett and Garrett Cole.
Garrett Cole, yep. Yeah, and even at the time when they had Francisco Liriano. So there's a bunch of this that, you could see this, and hopefully if they could get this up and into grips, then maybe there might be some actual light in this organization now to potentially build for their future.
Yeah, and in a division where, you have the Cubs at the top of the division, and right now the Brewers organization is looking so stupid letting Craig Counsell walk and, letting him go to the Cubs, because right now he's got the Cubs as the best team in that division and arguably talented enough to make a run in the playoffs and potentially go to the NLCS because of how good they are. Yep. And I think that, Craig Counsell was a manager I wanted the Guardians to get, but he got there 1 year sooner than when Francona retired. And I was just like, man, Craig Counsell was a guy that I really wanted for the Guardians so badly, because I know that with this roster and this talent that we have, and with how seasoned of a coach he is, he would have been able to get this team back on track. But if you can get Pittsburgh even just 2 more starting pitchers to pair with Paul Skeens, and then at least I'd say 2 or 3 more bats in that lineup, you'll actually have a pretty decent team to get out there for the fans and everything. And I think that, a lot of these people that are billionaires and stuff are starting to see that, there's money to be made in baseball, and all you have to do is just shell out the money. And it's like for baseball, it's not just about the money, because look at the 01 Mariners. They had all the money in the world that they spent and went 113 and still lost. But you also got to build a good minor league system, and that's what they're doing. But you got to get some free agents in here that want to come play, and we are not seeing that with Pittsburgh.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It'd be really interesting, though, from this point forward, but hopefully they can get it built on at some point.
I hope so, because they need it. The Rockies need it. The A's need it.
Yeah, all those teams, they all need it. All right, Chase with the news.
This is the Hot Press.
So yeah, I going back to basketball talk, because I got the Pacers tonight. Tyrese Halliburton, we know he's coming back from an injury. And I don't know how he'll play amongst this injury, because I know he accumulated 4 points in the last game. Wasn't really his best. And then everybody else, they started stepping up all around him, and they were able to get points up and on the board. But I do want to go back to this, this Lakers talk here for a second, because here's the thing is I've grown up watching the Lakers. I mean, I was growing up in an era. I was lucky enough to be born right in the middle of 90s. Okay, so I was a 95 kid, and I was able to see MJ. I was able to see, Kobe at his time with the Lakers. And I actually had, a small little Kobe jersey that I wore when I was a kid. And I loved every moment of it, because everybody was all excited for the Lake Show. But here's the thing about it. And I watched Winning Times. I watched the documentary. And the thing about the Lakers is that the Lakers, with Dr. Buss, when he ended up purchasing this organization in 1979, okay, it was a brand new location. It was a brand new team that, not a ton of people really, focused a lot of their attention on. But you did have, Jerry West. You did have the glory days of the Lakers up at that time, and he is also the iconic logo. But the thing about what Dr. Buss was trying to implement is, to me, I almost accumulate this the same exact way that I feel about Al Davis of the Raiders, because they both were rebels of both their sports, in basketball and in the NFL. And the thing about the two of them is that they had a particular rival. So the Lakers, their rivals were always against the Boston Celtics. And at that time, if any of you have watched Winning Times, go watch it. It's a very good one. Now, they're not completely accurate with some of these, with some of these actors and actresses. But here's the thing. The storyline of it is unique because of the fact of you have a young kid out of Michigan State in Magic Johnson, and you're pairing him with an old aging Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and who still gave you at least enough gas in the tank. So that Lakers team, and even when you bring in, James Worthy, and you bring in a couple of other really good players up from there, that team was something else. And the team that they really had to get through was Larry Bird's Celtics. Okay, him, Kevin McHale, multiple other players. Boston was just, they were angry, in your face, spitting on you, throwing elbows. I mean, you think that, the Detroit Bad Boys with Isaiah Thomas and even with Lambeer was that bad towards Jordan and the Bulls. Imagine what this would have looked like between the Lakers and Celtics. And it was an iconic, more well-respected rivalry than anything else. And so for the Lakers now to officially sell the team to Mark Walter, the one who's also the owner of the Dodgers, only tells you about a few things. Number one is money is hot and booming in Los Angeles, especially in California. I know there's lots of activities. I'm not going to get into political stuff, but the thing about it is the money is growing higher and higher in Los Angeles. It's growing everywhere in a lot of these big money markets, because right now, Mark Walter, he's the owner of the Dodgers. What is the one thing, the best thing that Mark Walter has is he's got Andrew Freeman in the front office, but he's also got Magic Johnson, an iconic LA face. And the two of them know how to manage business and money very, very well together. And Magic Johnson, being a former player, he understands Los Angeles. He understands the culture. So Andrew Freeman and everyone else up and in the front offices, by the time that they ended up signing Shohei Ohtani, they knew what they were getting. They were getting an international superstar, one that was going to obviously sell out tickets in Dodger Stadium, and then they did new renovations. They ended up getting new promotions, all this other stuff that was helping out for the Dodgers. And the Dodgers, they were the higher favorites to win in the World Series last year, and they are again this year. But the only difference of it is pitching has become a little bit of an issue for the Dodgers, but you knew what you were getting with Shohei Ohtani, an international superstar that is going to make bank for all of you. That's initially with what the Lakers now are having to deal with once they got Luka. And by the way, did you see Luka Doncic recently? He's actually shed off a few pounds, and he's actually starting to look a lot leaner, and he's also starting to look a little bit more athletic. I think part of that reason is because they needed some motivation. And we know international stars, they're built differently. They have a different dietary. They have a different workout program. But the difference of it is that once you're up and in here, not everyone's all the same. So LeBron, I'm sure, probably ended up, voicing that out to him. But now you have your international star. And do you think Luka Doncic has the power to honestly influence many of these other players in the NBA to come to Los Angeles? Okay, Kobe, he had Gary Payton, he had Karl Malone, he had Derek Fisher, he had Pau Gasol, Ron Artest, multiple other players. And it's all because Kobe was all about the grind. He was all about the work and the time. He was all about that. Iconic Laker. For LeBron, it's different. LeBron is basically like in his mogul stage where he's basically just worrying about his LA business. And yeah, he's playing for the Lakers, wants to win another title. He already won one in 2020 amongst the bubble, but at the same time, he was influencing a lot of players to come here. Anthony Davis, several other players. Clutch Sports with Rich Paul. So the thing about the Lakers is that they are needing a new image. And they've already started that by the time they renamed the arena as instead of Staples Center, now it's Crypto Arena. Really, really hard for me to even really kind of just get used to that. I'm sure just like Pittsburgh Steelers fans, they try to get used to a Acrisure Stadium rather than it being Heinz Field. Like that takes a long time. But to me, I've even talked to people when it came to, the Ball Arena. People always called it the Pepsi Center still. They don't even refer to it as Ball Arena, but it's going to take some time to adjust to it. But I think the deal of it is $10 billion. You know how much that, because the Lakers, they weren't even that much when they first bought them. So when Dr. Buss initially made that transaction, turning it from what it was years ago in 1979 to here we are in 2025, and the franchise is $10 billion. That's insane. Because that just tells you how iconic the Lakers brand really is. So, to me, I think this is a brighter future. And Mark Walter, by the way, he has a very good future. To me, I think with having the Dodgers, having the Lakers, he also owns the LA Sparks. He also owns a Formula One team. And he has also he's also invested in women's hockey. So there's sports around here for Walter. So I think to me, it feels a lot like this is a guy like Stan Kroenke coming in. Okay, this sounds a lot like Stan Kroenke-esque. If you're lucky enough that if you get somebody like Mark Walter in the building and he potentially becomes an NFL owner, maybe this might change some things up. But Lakers, Dodgers, two iconic brands formed up in one ownership. Why not? And you got two international stars walking into your city, Luka Doncic and Shohei Ohtani. That's the best way that you could honestly sell this pitch. I never thought that I would see this in my life, but the Dodgers, they made it happen. And to me, I'm always going to reminisce a lot of the good memories of the Lakers for years and what Dr. Buss has done for this organization. And look, Jeannie, I have utmost respects for her, but to me personally, much like I look at Mark Davis, is they both don't have kind of the qualities and tangents that their fathers had. I mean, Al Davis was a rebel. He didn't care what the NFL said about him. He didn't care about any of that. And yet he had one of arguably the best coaches, John Madden. It's crazy, right? And then you look at, them having, Pat Riley. I mean, Pat Riley was an amazing coach and, continuously coached. And then, he became an owner. So this is going to be a new age for the Lakers. But to me, hopefully they will stand by exactly what the Laker brand is about. That's my only hope for it. And I'm hoping that I could, at the very least, see this thing through and see exactly what this will look like at the end of the day. Other news that also came up, I was curious about this because Jair Alexander, Chase, he's now a part of the Baltimore Ravens, signing a $6 million contract. This is typical of Baltimore. A quick note of this is because, to me, Baltimore, they're a well-respected, defensively physical franchise. And
they got to stop getting away with this, dude. It sucks.
But this is who they are. I mean,
sucks. Them and the Eagles, man. They've been snatching and poaching all of the great.
Let me ask you this though: if this was ever the case with these franchises like the Eagles and the Ravens, who else could have honestly have done it? The Chargers, the Lions,
the Bills, the Chiefs, like anybody.
Why wouldn't anybody give them a call? That's the other thing that I also look at too. But
because a lot of them don't have the money because they're paying their quarterbacks.
That was $6 million for 1 year. Like, and here's the thing. The Bills.
Well, he did take a pay cut. He originally wanted $10 million, but he took $6 because Lamar Jackson was his teammate and everything. So that's
but they know that they are accounting for at least, their franchise quarterback. So, okay. So the initial deal, this is what it was said. It's a $4 million contract with incentives that can go up to $6 million. So it's $4 million at the end of it. So you're telling me that any of these other teams couldn't afford $4 million for 1 year?
It just pisses me off because they already had Nate Wiggins, they already had Marlon Humphrey, they got Kyle Hamilton, and they got Malachi Starks this year that fell in their laps.
And you know what? How can you not respect the front offices for the business that they're doing in Baltimore? Because you know what they're thinking? We've got Joe Burrow twice a year, and they just extended their 2 receivers. We need to shut that down. They just let Aaron Rodgers go to Pittsburgh. They got to shut that down. And then potentially with whatever happens with Cleveland, they got to shut that down.
You know what I want? I want Ozzie Newsome to come out of retirement and be the Browns GM.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be something? A former Browns tight end comes in, becomes the Browns GM, and then turns around the organization like he did with the Ravens. Like the last pick that he made for the Baltimore Ravens franchise, the last first-round pick that he made was Lamar Jackson.
Yep. Yeah.
Let that sink in. Ozzie Newsome, a decorated player and a decorated GM, arguably known as a top 10 tight end of all time, has, went from a player to a GM, to a Super Bowl winning GM, and then to getting another franchise quarterback for that franchise and building a top tier team.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah. I mean, but this happens all the time with a lot of these teams. And the thing about it is whatever the influence is for some of these players, and it ain't even just about, the Ravens getting away with it. But the fact of the matter is that players at times, this always happens with veteran players. They choose to want to play where they want to play, and depending on what the contracts will set like. But I like this because the fact you're getting year 2 of Nate Wiggins, that's a very good build. And you have a veteran corner right there who knows a thing or two about building the best looking corner there in the secondary. And then, Marlon Humphrey. Marlon Humphrey in the last few years has been kind of accumulating injuries. So who knows what that secondary might look like. They might roll the dice with this Kyle Hamilton, several other players. They're so good. But this is typical for organization because they will look at what do we have in our core right now and who are we facing twice a year and find ways to get you up and over the hump. Because think about it. Baltimore playing Josh Allen in that game, losing by 2, had it not been for certain possessions and situations, they would have never been in that predicament. But sometimes you're never always going to be perfect in these situations. You're never always going to be that, but you have to face adversities at the end of the day. So I'm curious how this is going to be, but again, I was not surprised. I was like, Baltimore of all organizations that love defense, no defense, and they are a well-respected franchise that gets with the times. Like, can't blame them. So, yeah, interesting in itself. But again, Asante Samuel Jr. is still available on the free agent market.
So are a lot of other people. Like, a lot of other people. Like, the Browns need wide receiver help. Go out and sign Keenan Allen for a 1-year deal.
Yeah, you could sign a lot of these players for 1-year deals and at least get supplemental help. I mean, that's the one thing. That
Amari Cooper's still available, too.
Yep. Amari Cooper's still available. Multiple other players are still available. So it's not like they can't get it. It's not like they can't get a deal done. They could get a deal done with at least a 1-year contract. So, yeah. Good stuff here today. Show tomorrow. At least we're getting a little bit of a breakup on it, but shout out to all of our interviewers here today. We've had earlier on, we actually had our own separate interview, but we had a representative of the Oklahoma City Thunder. He's actually going to the arena to go and watch tonight's game. And I asked him, I was like, should we expect some sort of party in OKC, and how is that going to work? Because we're so used to Oklahoma being, being a college town. So I don't know what that atmosphere is going to look like if tonight is the night that happens. So, all right. And then, of course, Jack Bushman, Locked On Blackhawks. Ian and Laura coming on in here for Locked On Canadians. Really happy for their times up from here, guys. Appreciate everybody for dropping on by and hearing up and onto the show with Chase and myself. We'll see you guys tomorrow on a Friday on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Take care, everyone.